Good morning, guys. Everybody hear me okay? Oh, here we go. I thought the house had this thing curved over right now. I thought we were winning, Dexter, but Miss Gloria showed up. Now we don't have the edge. We didn't start. We're just now getting here, guys. We're looking online. Who all do we have online here? We got Goodman, Senator Goodman. Is that it? Can you make that flip? Or is there a way for me to? Or is that everybody?
Yeah, it's everybody. It's everyone on the agenda, basically.
Oh, everybody on the agenda plus Goodman. All right, perfect. All right, well, we'll call this House and Senate Joint Study Committee on Georgia Music Heritage to order. This will be our third meeting, and I believe we'll have one more to finalize the details of what we've discussed in previous meetings, plus this one as well. So I look forward to hearing from everybody, and we'll get this thing started. Representative Sharper, if you don't mind blessing the day, and we'll get this thing going. I'm sorry, what number are you, my man? 8?
Let us pray. Dear Heavenly Father, we just thank you for this day that you've made, God. We will rejoice and be glad in it. We ask you to just give us the wisdom, knowledge, and understanding we need to go forth about the people's business. And God, we just give you all the praise and the honor for all the blessings of our health, God. In your precious name we pray. Amen.
Thank you, Representative. All right. We are going to start this off with Mr. Anthony, Director of the Texas Music Office in Austin, Texas. I imagine he's going to be online.
I'm online. Yes, sir.
So I don't have to hit anything. I'm going to turn mine off. I appreciate you being here. I appreciate the great state of Texas. A big fan of Texas music. I grew up a lifelong Willie Nelson fan, so I've been to Texas for a few concerts, and I look forward to returning in some future date.
Well, Chairman, I appreciate that. I appreciate all of your time. My name is Brendan Anthony. I'm Director of the Texas Music Office. I am based in Austin, Texas, and I work in the Office of the Governor. And I want to say a special thank you to the Music Heritage Study Committee, senators and representatives, for taking the time you've already taken and the time you're going to take to consider the tremendous impact of your Georgia music industry economy. It's truly a great responsibility. And the fact that you're all here talking about it and giving it considered debate is a very, very good sign for what's to come in your great state of Georgia. You mentioned Willie Nelson. I'm a longtime Texas music participant in that. I'm a longtime touring and recording musician based out of Austin. I've actually been honored to play with Willie Nelson a couple times, and I've played with a touring act by the name of Pat Green based in Texas. And we played your great state many, many times, Macon, Athens, Atlanta, many, many times. It was one of our favorite places to play. So I'm honored to be back in Georgia virtually, speaking about stuff that I love, and that's support and advocacy for the music industry writ large. And that is what we do at the Texas Music Office. I'm going to talk through briefly the history and formation of the office, so you kind of get a roadmap for how we did it here. I'm going to talk through some of the programs. I'm going to talk through how our team operates, how many of us there are, kind of how we're able to do what we do, and then talk through some current projects that we're really proud of. And then I want to wrap all that up quickly enough so that you can feel that you have all of the questions that you have for me answered in a timely manner. So Chairman, thank you so much for the invitation to speak with you this morning. As I mentioned, my name is Brendan Anthony. I'm Director of the Texas Music Office. We were formed in 1991 through a process very similar to the one you're going through now. A Texas Music Commission was convened in 1990. Comprised of elected representatives and senators and industry leaders from around the state. And their mission was to decide how the state was going to create institutionalized support for a very, very hallowed industry in our state, the music industry. That work was approved, and it was decided that the state would go forward in creation of the Texas Music Office. That office was created in 1991, so we're over 30 years old now, which is really fascinating for an office like ours. We have lived through several administrations, worked through several administrations, and Ann Richards, who was a governor several years ago, who was a huge music fan, made a very important step of moving that office into the office of the governor, which is where it lives today. That gives the office some protections, sure, but it also gives it a tremendous amount of institutional support. There is nothing like support from the chief executive of state for programs of many kinds, as you all know, and having that support at our back certainly allows us to do some things we could never do otherwise. The office serves as a clearinghouse of information. So we are subject matter experts about those who participate as stakeholders in the music industry community statewide. We are connective tissue for that industry statewide. Texas, as is Georgia, is a big place. As a convening authority and as a connecting hub that is not participating in the business of music between parties, we can connect parties to allow them to do that business. So we serve as a clearinghouse of information, connective tissue, and we serve as a business development agency and an industry and issue translator for the music industry community, both at city, at state level, and at federal level. I'll jump ahead a few years. In 2014 rather, Governor Abbott was elected. And in 2015, he took office and began to rearrange how some of the offices worked under what sort of org charts. The Texas Music Office at that time was almost a freestanding commission under the office of the governor, but it was then moved by the governor's executive staff under the umbrella of economic development and tourism, which is another asset that has allowed us so much latitude and support as we go forward with our programs. Coincidentally, I was appointed that year to assess the capabilities of the office as it stood that year, that day when I was appointed. I found that the office at that time was very much focused on this information clearinghouse aspect, which is very important, but it had not taken itself outside those walls in many years. It was not active in communities around the state. It was not particularly active in State House, and it certainly was not active on a federal advocacy level in any way, shape, or form. So that was my assessment then. And the programs I'll talk through now are how we went about redressing those issues. The conversation about the music industry in Texas had become focused solely, in my opinion, solely focused on the cultural aspects and contributions of the music industry, all of which are so important and need to be brought up time and time again. But they're all relatively well understood. Chairman, you said rightfully, you're a fan of Willie Nelson. Well, gosh, I don't want to meet someone who isn't, but at the same time, we can't talk about the music industry solely in that way, correct? So it is so much more than that. It is an understanding that while cultural contributions in Texas from luminaries such as Willie Nelson and George Strait and Selena and Beyonce and so many others who have come out of Texas should be recognized regularly, they do not address the economic aspects of the music industry writ large in our state. So now we've begun talking about the music industry in two very different sides of the coin, culturally and economically. So one of our first moves was to take that data that we use to serve as that information clearinghouse and create economic impact studies through those big pieces of data. We have over 16,000 listings that we house in our office to begin to tell the story of the economic impact of the Texas music industry. Now, at this time, after our third commission of an economic impact study, we can tell you that over 100,000 individuals make their income, create small business solely through the pursuit of the music industry in the state. And they create over $440 million of revenue for our tax base annually. So that is an industry that, even given a blind taste test, is worthy of support, institutional support statewide. So we began to change that conversation through the use of those numbers. Our legislature convenes biennially, so we generate an economic impact study every 2 years to suit the needs of each legislative session coming up, so that we can go about the work of advocating for that in House and Senate districts across the state, even if that means just delivering information about what exists in those House and Senate districts to those elected representatives so that they better understand their constituencies when others come and advocate for needs of those constituents. It's a very, very important thing that we do locally, is to provide that bedrock information so that people can make informed decisions about how best to serve the needs of those constituents. We also want to be a resource for industry professionals statewide. So as we're advocating for them in State House in that way and across the state in that way, we have created a directory that is very, very easy to navigate now so that people can find each other online. Now, with the advent of search engines, et cetera, this process has become much easier for folks as they search locally, but our industry database that we house is still state of the art. We're very, very proud of it. And as I said, it allows us to create these economic impact studies that allow us to advocate for the industry in a very educated subject matter expert type of way. Along the way, as we began to understand the needs of industry professionals, we found that a common issue kept cropping up. And it's one that is present in Georgia as well. It's present in a lot of places that do not have a very, very well-known and historic music industry center. I point to centers like London, New York, Nashville, and Los Angeles. We kind of have an idea of what they do in those places. Those are places with ecosystems that have every moving part necessary to create commercial success, monetization of intellectual property, massive exposure through radio and record distribution. Those are things that exist in certain small parts in places like Atlanta and Athens and certain smaller communities in your state. They certainly exist in ours, in Austin, Dallas, Fort Worth, San Antonio, Houston, and some of the smaller communities that make up our overall industry landscape. We needed to create partnerships with industry centers to bring resources to our people and in turn be. So to that end, we created a partnership with BMI, which is the largest performance rights organization in the country. And we helped them create their first satellite expansion office in Texas, their first expansion in over 23 years. They are living and working permanently in Texas now. There are other examples of that work that we've done that exist in smaller scales. That is the one that made the most sort of reverberations throughout the state already. It's something that I hope other states take on. An advantage that Atlanta has in particular is that they've had offices like that for a long time. So you've had some advantages that we've not had in a while as well. But we're very proud of that work that we do in economic development, business development, so that we can be a resource for those folks at home. Now I'm going to get into some of the things that we do day to day here, just so you get a sense of what we do as servants, public servants, and our work that we do for our constituents in the music industry. We are not a big team, but we do service a very, very large state with 254 counties and music industry components that exist in nearly every one. And so I'm betting that you assume that we have a team of 25 to 30 hardworking professionals that show up every day and are spread across the entire state. You would be incorrect in your assumption, though. We have a 4-person team, and we all work very, very hard and wear several hats to make sure that we cover all of the aspects of programs that we need to. We have an office manager, we have a social media marketing coordinator, and we have an individual who helps run the Music Friendly Communities program, which I'm about to get into, which is a full-time job, which allows me to spend time outside of state, speaking at conferences and working with people like your wonderful team members in Georgia and many others. So it allows me to be a spokesperson for our state's music industry outside the state quite a bit. We began working on a project to make us better connected to our entire state in 2015 upon my appointment, where I realized that our state agency, the Texas Music Office, was not connected in a meaningful way to communities around the state. To that end, we created what we call the Music Friendly Community Program. It is a way for us to find a single point of contact in industry centers around the state, whether those cities are large or small, so that we can provide regular reporting, have a real understanding of what's happening in that industry community, and we can better do our jobs as a state agency. We began that process by formulating the program itself. That is an extensive checklist and a high bar for entry. We ask that cities create a single point of contact and a music officer locally in city government in some way, shape, or form, that they create an advisory board to report to them. They create a database that mirrors ours. They demonstrate partnerships with educational and nonprofit resources locally, and that they sign a memorandum of understanding with our Office of the Governor so that we demonstrate at least well understood and enumerated partnership. So as you can see, between working with various types of government, that's a high bar for entry. That's a lot of work to become certified. Our first certified community was Fort Worth in September of 2017, after about a year of work on their certification, and many followed. In fact, I was in Houston 2 nights ago to certify them as our 38th satellite office and music-friendly community. That means now that every city over 1 million population in Texas is a member of our program and is out using our framework we've helped them build to serve their local community better by beginning the process of listening to industry stakeholders, absorbing their feedback, their needs, their complaints, yes, but taking that overall feedback and hopefully using that feedback to develop local policy, not state policy, but local policy that will allow them to better react to a, how do I say this, a group of creatives, a group of the creative economy that frankly doesn't get heard from very often. So we want music industries locally to be validated, to be respected, and to be heard. So this framework we've given these communities now allows the city government to go into those communities and ask for their help in formulating policy that will help them. In my mind, that's good government. And so we're proud from the state side not to provide oversight into how exactly they go about doing that, but we provide that framework and support in that we can network these communities once they've achieved that certification. It's a tremendous program. It is one that simply does not exist anywhere else in the country. The fact that we're up to and will be up to 40 satellite offices and partners, affiliate partners by the end of the year is a success story that I'm very, very proud of. And we have people attending from other parts of the country to come to see our Sounds and Cities conference we hold annually for all of those liaisons and music officers to talk with one another in November in Fort Worth. So we're very, very proud of that program. More information is available online. I'll certainly be able to provide any follow-up information in the form of questions or additional resources if you'd like those to be sent over. I'd like to hit on a couple really important concepts too that will maybe inform your decision-making process and inform your debate as you go forward with making these important decisions. I have found that it has been a tremendous asset that our office is within the Office of the Governor. It is protected from conversations that happen on budget night during our legislative sessions, in that it is a trustee program of the governor's office. So it is one that is advocated for during budget night in a way that every other agency that lives in that org chart is advocated for. It is also a tremendous asset that we are housed within the Office of Economic Development and Tourism. This gives us a scale up when it comes to research capability. This gives us a scale up when it comes to any travel resources we may need that are not included in the TMO's budget, Texas Music Office's budget, as allocated by the legislature. It also gives us a really solid tie-in with other commissions that do similar work and some that don't. So we work closely with our Texas Film Commission. They're our sister agency. Work closely with the tourism agency. They're a sister agency to ours. We also work closely with the Economic Development Tourism Finance Department. It gives us resources and scale up capability we certainly would not have if we were a standalone agency operating on simply our own devices. I mentioned that we have a small team, but we do a lot with it. And we do a lot with it because we enjoy that support from economic development, tourism, and the protection offered by the Office of the Governor. Expounding on that point, being a part of the Office of the Governor means that we enjoy that full support from the chief executive and his executive staff when we need assistance to do things that are above our capabilities as an office. And I'll point out a couple key success stories of that. As I mentioned, we advocate for and work for the music industry community in state and local level. But where some of our biggest successes have come is in our influence simply by providing context and information to key members on the federal level. The music industry community nationwide in the United States of America is one that relies on decisions made in Washington, D.C. to monetize intellectual property. Now, let me distill that down into terms that even I can understand. That means that songwriters and people who create pieces of unique intellectual property, songs, song catalogs, their rates for payback are determined at the federal level. So when Congress convenes and makes decisions about how these people create these pieces of intellectual property, how songwriters write by themselves or with one another, or once they put their songs up for your consideration and purchase, either on streaming or through mechanical royalties, aka you buy something, those rates are all set by Congress. Those rates are set by district courts afterwards. So it's very important that at that top end, there is information and context given during times of important debate. The Department of Justice occasionally makes decisions that may come down on one side or the other as it pertains to our digital service providers, DSPs. DSPs are Spotify, Apple, others you know of that stream music that you can listen to at your leisure. Those rates are set by Congress and they're set by district courts. And the Department of Justice from time to time will make rulings about how certain things will work in the industry that may benefit DSPs, may not benefit them. We always want to make sure that those changes do not in some way hurt small business in our state. The decision was made a few years ago about how songwriters could write together that fundamentally affected the way that they made money off the things they wrote. And we asked Governor Abbott to eventually write a letter to then Attorney General Loretta Lynch stating our displeasure about a decision that was made that would affect small business in our state. And the decision was ultimately reversed. And we were very, very proud of that outcome. Music modernization was a tremendous landmark change in copyright reform. It put songwriters back on the path of potentially making back money on songs that they've written and created. We had two senators at that time, Senator Cornyn and Senator Cruz, who served on the Senate Judiciary Committee. And we provided through the Texas Music Office and the help from our Texas delegation information about how we perceived a vote, either yes or no, could affect small business in our state, in our music industry that we represent. And Senator Cornyn understood that information and helped pass that legislation that became, to date, the largest copyright reform bill ever signed by Congress that adjusted songwriter rates up 15+%. That's a tremendous change in the industry. We were proud to play a small part in it. We would not have been able to provide that context and information that led to that decision without the help of our chief executive in our Texas delegation. Simply wouldn't have happened. So the fact that we were able to do that is something I'm very, very proud of. I'm proud of that capability. I hope to be able to deploy it in more ways. And in fact, we have. So as COVID ravaged industries of all type across the country, a bill called Save Our Stages was created that ended up in the Shuttered Venue Operators Grant, which became one of the largest federal assistance bills ever signed. I think most of us are aware of it. The Texas Music Office was very instrumental behind the scenes in creating consensus amongst over 800 Texas music venues that weighed in on that decision by talking to their locally elected and federally elected representatives. And again, Senator Cornyn from Texas was instrumental, as was Senator Klobuchar, in passing that bill. We were thrilled that the language that ended up being the language that was passed into law as Shuttered Venue Operators Grant was more than partially created in Texas by members that worked through other processes that we've attempted at State House here. So we were thrilled to have been part of that process. Again, it comes back to capability that we would not have if we did not enjoy the support of our chief executive and his executive staff here. So again, to recap there, we try to be tremendously helpful on the city level. We try to be tremendously helpful on the state level and State House, and we try to affect change that will at least not hurt small business in our industry space back home that happens federally. I will say that the fact that Georgia is taking into account that this industry is worthy of this kind of conversation shows a tremendous amount of forward thinking. It shows a tremendous amount of foresight on your part. The creation of a Georgia Music Office, if you will, that can from an institutional level understand the needs of the industry, the needs of the economics of the industry, the needs of policy change for the industry statewide, will be a tremendous asset to people who create and maintain small business concerns in your state. I would be thrilled personally to work alongside an officer of that type as we try to affect change for the industry writ large. It's something, like I mentioned, that we try to do every day here at TMO, and to have allies from wonderful states like Georgia would be a tremendous asset to us, and I hope would help folks living and working in Georgia as well. I would be remiss if I didn't point out that the music office gets pulled into extra projects as well as some of those you can find online at texasmusicoffice.com. As COVID recovery began to happen, I was appointed chair of the Arts, Culture, and Entertainment section of the Texas Strike Force to reopen. And I made sure that the music industry was spoken for during discussions, very important discussions about how to reopen small business, large commercial concerns in our state during the months following shutdown. The fact that the music industry had a voice like mine on that committee was instrumental in saving some of the music venues that we have across the state, and a lot of the professional services that go along with working and advocating for the music industry in Texas. I was proud to do it, and I was always reminded every day when we went to do that work that we were lucky to have an office like ours, because as a longtime touring and recording musician myself, I don't know where we'd be without voices that spoke for people like I used to be as that type of industry professional. Also recently, in the wake of our Astroworld disaster and tragedy in Houston, I was named chair of the Texas Task Force on Concert Safety, which further examined, yes, the root causes of that particular tragedy, and the idea that we never wanted to see another incident like that ever happen in our state again. But it also led us to an examination of our state permitting processes, our state permitting statutes that exist, and how we can go about fixing those and bringing those into modernity so that at least we have a firm understanding of how we're supposed to do these things in our state. And time will tell through the work of the legislature how those changes that we recommended are put into actual practice through law. So we continue to affect how our industry operates in large ways day over day. And we're very, very proud to do it. We hope that the work of the Texas Music Office continues to grow, but what we really hope it does is stays very, very meaningful to those who run, operate, and create small business in the music industry space in our state. And I'm very, very proud to speak to your committee this morning. This is work that was done a few years ago in Texas, yes, but it comes with the same kind of intent that has led to this sort of change and advocacy for a very, very important industry to Texans in Georgia. So I commend you on all your work. I commend you on the time you've put into it, on the formation of this committee. And with that, I'll thank you for your time, and thanks for having me. And I'd be glad to answer any questions you may have.
I'm sure we have questions. I appreciate that presentation about what amazing things you're doing in Texas and have been for quite some time. I will say that I think I must have seen you on the stage back in 99-ish when I went to Luckenbach to the 4th of July picnic. I think
Yeah.
Pat Green was there. So I saw you there, and I've been a big fan of Live at Billy Bob's. So
That's great.
kudos for you for career, and I'll go ahead and yield for any questions. All right, what number are you? Number 5. There you go.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you. That was a great presentation. I walked in a little late, and so I just wanted to ask you again, two questions, if I may. One, what did you say was the economic impact of your music industry? I think I got $400 something million.
Yes, so I'm pulling this back up so I give you accurate figures of our latest economic impact study that we commissioned. And I want to say this with a caveat that we commissioned this to reflect numbers prior to COVID shutdown, because we wanted a benchmark on either side parenthetically of that event. So these numbers that I'll read to you now are 2019 numbers. We just submitted this data to have the new study commissioned that we will have available prior to convening our legislative session in January. So new numbers, I'd be happy to send to you at that time. The numbers as they exist now, over 100,000 permanent jobs, 4.4 billion in annual earnings, 10.8 billion in annual economic activity, $440 million in tax revenue from those impacts. Now, what I didn't list for you there are the indirect effects. And as we all know, as veterans of creating economic impact studies, sometimes those might not make too much sense. What I read to you are the direct effects of the industry statewide.
Great, thank you. And then one other question, if I may. Did you start, so when the Texas Music Office began, were you always housed under the Office of the Governor, or was that a shift? I guess I'm trying to understand if there have been changes to the office, kind of this is a best practices question. Are there ways that you started in which you realized weren't working well and so you shifted, or kind of from the beginning, are there core things that you were doing that you'd recommend to anybody else considering this to do from the beginning as well?
Yes, and thank you for that wonderful question. I have two things that are fundamental changes in how we do our work here that have happened both before I joined and during my appointment. Two things to keep in mind that have made our work so much easier and more effective. In 1991, when this was formed, it was housed as a standalone agency. Soon thereafter, Governor Ann Richards moved that standalone agency, the Texas Music Office, into the Office of the Governor, which provides it all sorts of systemic protections when it comes to budgeting. And it also provides it support when it needs to scale up, when we need, larger, more monumental calls made on behalf of the industry. Let's ask the governor to do it. Why wouldn't we do that? So now we have that capability because she moved the office into the Office of the Governor, where it remains today. That's one. Number two is in 2015, the office was moved under the umbrella of economic development and tourism, where we can sit along other agencies that are actively working to do similar things for their parts of their constituencies, but with scale-up capability, both in research and travel resources that frankly make a job like ours even possible in a lot of ways. So understanding that one of our core functions should be to create jobs and protect small business in Texas was one that came along with being realigned under that economic development and tourism umbrella. So I think it's important. I think it's allowed us to do something that prior probably would have been really difficult because that was not part of our perceived mandate before that. I perceive because I was not there prior to that realignment.
Thank you.
You bet. Thank you for the question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Anthony, for your great presentation. I have one question about the budget. I know it's predicted under the governor's office. How much is that budget? Is it a line item in his budget?
That's correct. It's a line item in the budget. Yes, ma'am.
And how much is the budget?
It's
Your
over,
budget.
it's just over 300,000+, and it is for virtually salaries only for the team.
Okay, thank you.
And
I'd
I'm
say that's a pretty good-
again for, I'm so sorry. Again, for questions like that, I'm happy to provide any of that information. I'm be happy to send that to you. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, I'd say $300,000 for a $10 billion worth of economic impact's a pretty good bang for your buck.
Well, let me follow that up with saying that while we derive a budget that covers salaries for our entire team, we can scale up through travel resources available through EDT, as I mentioned. All of the travel that we do comes from elsewhere. It comes from the budget of Economic Development and Tourism and the Office of the Governor. So there are additions to that cost. I want to be very clear about that. We travel all over the place. We travel nationally. So those costs come from elsewhere. So I want to be clear about that.
I think that does it. I appreciate you very much, Mr. Anthony. Appreciate what you do, and thanks for being here with us today. And kudos. Hopefully get to Austin one of these days and catch up.
You're more than welcome. We'd love to have you. Thank you for your time.
Yes, sir. All right, folks, we're going to move on. We're going to head to Mr. Norm Easterbrook, Executive Director of the River Center Performance Art in Columbus. I believe he's online as well.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. I want to echo Brendan's appreciation for the time to speak to you all today. And I know that your time is valuable, and on behalf of our trustees and everyone here, thank you for all that you do for the state. I know it's not easy. I wanted to speak to the economic impact in our community and what the tax incentive that we're looking for would help us to do here in Columbus. I've been with the River Center for 7 years. Prior to my time at the University of Mississippi, before that, I was in Augusta and also Americus, starting theaters there as well. So I'm familiar with the state. What we're doing here in Columbus are what we call tour startups. This is very much similar to the musical production as well. When a tour moves from a major market or moves from Broadway, it needs to go somewhere to put the tour together. It needs to assemble the actors, the creative team, the costumers, the choreographers, all of that together in some place so they can prepare the tour to go on tour around the country. When that happens for us, we've negotiated several of these over the past years, a few of these over the past years. Our most recent one was the national tour of Jesus Christ Superstar. And for that tour, the producers anticipate spending money in the community where they're starting the tour. And just as a real example, Jesus Christ Superstar had 80 staff members in town. They bought 720 room nights in Columbus in a 9-day period that they were here. They come to our theater, and we structure a financial model with them that gives them advantages of working in the theater. We waive rental fees and things like that. And then they come prepared to pay for all of the crew, all of the labor, and all of the expenses related to starting up their tour. So a production such as Jesus Christ Superstar, we haven't done a final study of it, but we expect that'll be just over $1 million new money that they brought to the community in that touring activity. It's important to us because it helps us maintain jobs in our economy. We have partnered with the Film Commission here, and we're working with them with their registry of workers, their labor registry, so that we can merge those two resources together so that when a production like this comes to our community, they will have workers here, and we will likewise be able to support those workers and keep those workers in our community. It's something that can't happen in major markets. We have our friends at the Fox Theater. They really can't do activity like this because their schedule is so full all of the time. For us, an activity like this helps us utilize existing infrastructure. It helps us fill our schedule with activity, and it helps us keep our employees being paid throughout that period of time. So it's a really valuable thing for us to be able to do in the economy. Unfortunately, we had been negotiating with the national tour of To Kill a Mockingbird, which is coming off Broadway to start its national tour. We were one of two contenders for that, and we were passed over, and the tour will originate out of New York State because of New York State's tax incentives that they offer to producers who originate these programs. And it's an unfortunate loss for us because it would have been one of our biggest tour startups. This is a model that can be replicated around the state. Myself and my staff here at River Center are more than happy and willing, should the tax incentive become useful for the producers, to share this information with other communities around the state, to work with other theaters. It's only going to help all of us that have these theaters in smaller communities and have invested in these spaces to be able to house these types of activities. Before we do these tour startups, River Center generates about $3.4 million in annual household income for the community. A general overall economic impact of 4.9 million. When we add to that anywhere between 750,000 to perhaps 1.2, 1.3 million per production project, that greatly increases the economic footprint that we have in our community. What we're looking for is there's currently legislation in place and rules in place that provide a tax incentive, but the parameters that make it accessible for the producers, they cannot meet those parameters. For example, right now it requires that a tour be on tour for 12 months. That's not a reality for theatrical production and musical production. The Jesus Christ Superstar started a 32-week tour here. That's about the outside maximum that a company can tour. So we're asking for that parameter to be adjusted, and also the amount of spending in the market. We would ask for that to be adjusted as well. Theatrical production especially does not spend as much money in the market as film production would. They're very lean and very frugal in their spending. But for a community such as Columbus, and I would say other communities around the state, that spending is quite significant, especially when they're utilizing a facility that already exists. So we're asking for these adjustments so we can have an economic development tool that we can go to the producers and say, not only will we favor you in our facility, but you can take advantage of this tax incentive as well. All of these companies come, like I say, the producers expecting to budget money and spend money. So all of the people they bring with them, they have per diems to spend in all of the local restaurants, entertainment. They are purchasing hotel rooms. We are not paying for that. They are. And add to that the materials, supplies, and ancillary services that they need in transportation, cleaning, laundry, and all of those things. The numbers add up quickly with the money that they bring into our community. I don't want to go on too terribly long to take up any of your time. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have, and we will be advocating for this in the next session and try to help as much as we can to make this work out.
Thank you so much, Mr. Easterbrook. Quick question: how many seats does the River Center have?
Yeah, and this
What's
is a great thing. We have 3 performance spaces. We have a 2,000 seat auditorium. That's the Bill Hurd Auditorium. We have an exquisite concert hall. Legacy Hall is 430 seats. And then the studio theater is 130 seats. River Center is unique because it's acoustically an extraordinary space. So we can support this type of production activity for both theater and music. We can bring rock and roll concerts into the Bill Hurd Auditorium. We can bring we can also bring in classical music performances for recording and things like that. And it's something that the community is very supportive of. Our local delegation has supported this in the past, and the Columbus consolidated government has consistently asked that this be approved and passed through with the help of our local legislative delegation as well. And they just recently renewed that request also. There's been some question in some of the committee hearings about what benefit this has for the citizens of the state. I think the job creation is obvious. I think the support of ancillary services is obvious. It leaves money behind that will ultimately generate state sales tax for the state. And beyond that, it makes a production that is a first line, top drawer production that's going to tour the country, available to our citizens at an affordable cost. There's no way that we could really bring shows like this to our community and expect them to be paid for completely by ticket revenue and corporate support and donors. So if you think about it, folks in Columbus, Georgia, got to see the opening night of a Broadway tour here in Columbus, and they were able to drive 5 minutes to the theater, dressed as they are, and to enjoy that performance and that production. The more we can develop a relationship with the producer as well, the more these companies, the more time the companies will stay with us. And it allows us to create opportunities for internships in educational institutions. And many of the companies that we've worked with as we've started conversations and we get used to each other and like each other, they say to us, well, we have workers here at River Center that we'd like to take with us on tour. So we're expanding the job opportunities for folks and enabling people to start careers right here in Columbus.
So just a quick follow-up. So the actual production, is that in the 2,000 seat auditorium?
Yes, sir, it is.
That's what they secure. Okay. I'm trying to picture how many of auditoriums do we have around the state that would meet that kind of 2,000, 1,500 seat capacity. I think as we look at something overarching for the state of Georgia, like I think it's important to know that we do have those assets in play in various communities. So obviously we can all do a little bit of homework and figure out what those are and where those are and build some synergy with the representatives / senators from those districts. So and I'll yield for further questions.
Can I ask a follow-up? It's number 5. Thank you. So just a follow-up to this idea about the capacity, the seat capacity, what is for a big tour coming off of Broadway that you've started up in Columbus, you place it in the 2,000 seat auditorium because you have that. From the producer standpoint, though, what's the smallest size auditorium that they would actually be interested in bringing a show to?
Yeah, there are many tours that are looking for places to start up. Now, Jesus Christ Superstar, we had 1,700 people in the theater for their opening night. We'll be working with an extraordinary theater company called Aquila Theater. They do educational theater programs. They'll be starting their tours of Julius Caesar and Pride and Prejudice. They are happy with a space of 700 seats. So that would include your Rylander Theater, that would include the Imperial. The Miller could do something like this with a musical organization. I don't mean to speak for those other theaters, but we can get you the information on those capacities. And that's why I say, knowing the theaters in the state, like I do, and the network that we have through the Georgia Venues nonprofit Arts and Venue Coalition, and then also through the Georgia Presenters Network, we can have contacts with all of those folks, and we can inventory those spaces and say, this is important to you. And I think it can be of benefit to communities of all sizes, because these performances vary as they do.
Great, thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. But I was just wondering, is there any particular state agency that you are working with in your efforts, or is there one that you think will benefit you as a whole, state agencies? Can you answer that for me?
Sure. I think right now that this all falls within the Department of Economic Development. And because it is a state sales tax incentive, I believe it falls in that area. Tourism is also interested in this from the music perspective. So I know that the Convention and Visitors Association is following this as well for the music heritage aspect of it. And again, for their interest in the hospitality industry, because this has a tremendous impact on the hospitality industry as well. So I would think those two would be the most likely agencies that would have an interest in this.
All right, thank you so much.
Not to mention the Georgia Arts Council, which is part of economic development as well. And one of their charges happens to be economic development and job creation in the state.
Chair, let me ask you a question. When a lot of these shows are put together, they are done by promoters and they shop the cities when they get ready to do a rock concert or a tour. Would this help you to be able to negotiate better by bringing those shows in the town? Because then you can, promoters usually deal with what venue is going to give me the best deal on in and out. Because that's what he deals with his expenses. Because usually on these shows, the promoter has to handle everything. He has to do the hotel rooms, the meals, all of that is included. And all of these acts have a rider, so he has to provide all that. Would that help you in being able to negotiate with these guys as far as bringing those hot shows and stuff into your facility?
If I understand the question correctly, no. Because what I believe you're referring to are events that we contract with or promoters that have a show that's already established that they would bring into the theater. They would still be looking for the same incentives and the same advantages, and we negotiate all the time on the costs related to the theater. The tax incentive here is for production companies to actually originate their tours here in Georgia. So they would spend extended time here rehearsing and preparing things to get ready to go on tour. So the incentive means here in this case would help them be able to do that and would be a powerful tool for us. As opposed to a promoter that is trying to place concerts that are all of a show that's already established and already created. Does that make sense?
Well, the reason I asked that, I'm from Macon, Georgia, and we used to have problems getting main acts into the Coliseum, which seats about 8,500. And part of that was that the ticket sales were down and they just canceled the show. And one of the reasons that they canceled the show was because of the cost associated with the venue and bringing that show to that particular venue. So what I'm asking is if you had those incentives that it would put you in a better negotiating situation as far as trying to bring those acts into your facilities.
Yes, it would, from the perspective of is that we would be able to develop the tour startup model, which would help solidify our budget and make it easier for us and give us more leeway to negotiate with the promoter to come in, as opposed to relying strictly on rentals from the promoter and ticket sales and ticket fees and things like that. So yes, it would help us stabilize our budget and our organization, and it would all work together to put us in a better position overall to bring those promoters into the community.
I think that's all the questions, sir. I appreciate you very much. Appreciate what you're doing to create such a awesome fabric of culture down in Columbus. Thank you very much.
Right. Thank you all.
All right, we're going to head on to our third speaker, Josh Smalls of Columbia County. We got Mr. Smalls.
Yes, sir. I'm
We
here.
call him Biggie. Is it Biggie Smalls? Was that his name growing up?
Yes, it has been that at various points. So, but yeah,
Yes.
thank you.
Look forward to
Yeah, go
seeing the videos.
I'm not sure if I could produce the same content that he did. But yeah, thank you to the committee chairman for giving me the time to speak today. As you said, my name is Josh Small. I am the general manager for the Columbia County Performing Arts Center in Columbia County, Georgia. It's actually Evans, Georgia, and I work for the county here. Previously, just a little bit of my background. I've been in venue management for about 16 years. The better part of that has been the last 14 years in downtown Augusta at the James Brown Arena and the Bell Auditorium. As recently as about 4 months ago, I was a general manager down in Albany, Georgia at the Albany Civic Center, Albany Municipal Auditorium, and Veterans Park Amphitheater. And now recently, I've been at the Performing Arts Center here in Columbia County for the last 4 months. So just getting started here. And what I want to talk to you about today, very similar to what Mr. Easterbrook had brought up earlier. We had a very similar situation to what he had. We being a brand new performing arts center, we have all the bells and whistles that a lot of these tours, the Broadway shows, the different concerts that start their tours up. We have all of those amenities, and we have actually, I think in the first year of the building, there were 2 of the large Broadway tours, Fiddler on the Roof and Anastasia, teched and set up their shows here at the venue. They were in the venue for 2+ weeks each, and then at the end, they had their shows, and then they moved on with the rest of their tour. So, I've had a similar situation within the last couple of weeks where we had the time to bring in one of those tour rehearsals, and we were one of a few venues in the running, and we were quickly eliminated because of the tax credit. And the show actually went to Louisiana due to the tax credit that they had there. So, same here, looking at the job impact, the revenue to the venue, the revenue to the area. The venue itself, we probably missed out on around $30,000 that we would have generated from having that here. We probably missed out on 50+ jobs over a 10-day period that we would have seen here. Going back to some of the other questions earlier, the tax credit would make it. We have many promoters that do shows here. They advocate on our behalf to try to get some of these rehearsals to the building. It doesn't necessarily help the promoter. They're more so trying to help the producer find a good place to land the tour. All of those things help in those conversations to get those events here. And being a brand new facility, it's from the venue that the tour eventually went to where we are. They would have preferred to be at our venue due to how new everything is, how easy it is to load in the show. We have 3 truck level docks and a 4th dock that you can ramp up to. So it's very easy to bring a show in here. It's very easy to set up. We have a great staff, and they would have come here if we had, if we had the tax credit. Also, you look at a venue like ours. It was just recently built, $33 million, public funded money. So the venue like this, the community would very much benefit from having those shows come through here. And it's not even just I've worked booking musical acts as well throughout my career, and those places are also looking for places to start their tour, to come in, to tech rehearse, to set up how they're going to go for their 30+ week tour. So all of that goes together and helps out with the hotel rooms, the restaurants, the cabs. It brings money to the area. So that's pretty much the the whole of what I want to touch on today. And I'd be happy to answer any additional questions.
Yeah, and what's your capacity in Columbia County?
So we are 2,062 total.
2,062. You got them by 62. Columbus better add a couple of seats sitting down on the front row.
That's right.
Mr. Josh, we appreciate you very much. Thank you for all you do. You have for being here today, and I appreciate you touring the state and all. I guess you Augusta to Albany back to Columbia County, so you've seen at least both sides of the state. Anyway, anytime you want to head up to North, we'll be glad to have you.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. All righty, moving along. Our final speaker of the day, Miss Mala Sharma, president of Georgia Music Partners and founder. I'm sure she's online, ready to go. What's behind you there? What's the photo behind you, Mala?
That is a Georgia artist who has now passed away. His name is Todd Murphy. That's one of his paintings.
Fabulous. Kind of a little envy there. All right. Thank you for being here today. I look forward to hearing what you have to say.
Well, thank you, Chairman, and thank you to all the committee members. I echo all the presenters who have, really commended you all on taking the time during this, your off session work and away from your other businesses to really listen to what the industry has had to say and wanted to share with you. I'm really just here to bookend a lot of what was said and answer any questions after that. But, Georgia Music Partners was founded about 10 years ago. And as we've gone around the state and heard from musicians, city leaders, agencies, studio owners, educators, music venue operators like Barry, record labels, all of those people are Georgia Music Partners members. We represent about the 50,000 music industry professionals from all around the state, every county in Georgia. And our focus over the last few years, in addition to the advocacy work we do at the city, county, and state level, has been really working with the communities as small as Brazelton, Georgia, and Fannin County, McKaysville, and Blue Ridge, Georgia, Athens, Augusta, Columbus, Albany, Valdosta. We've got music industry folks all over the state, and they have really, wanted to find ways, I think, to better work with the stakeholders, with city and state leaders, and with the industry as a whole to attract more business opportunities, to retain the talent that we have here, and to really shine a light on the success, not just in the past, because we have a lot of that, but really moving towards the future. And as you've heard, I think back in 2016, 2017, when that tax incentive was passed, we heard, how other states were paying attention to what we were doing in Georgia. We've always led as a music leader, but at that time, we were leapfrogged when Tennessee and other states, Ohio, Indiana, I believe Delaware now, have all kind of perfected their music incentives. So I hope that this committee is able to really dig in a little bit and look at that legislation. As you heard from Josh, Louisiana is taking opportunities from us. You heard from Norm, New York has taken some. We had concerts. I believe the Eagles and Elton John wanted to start their tours here. Ultimately, those were those were rehearsed in other places with tax incentives. So we'd like to see those opportunities brought here and the hundreds of jobs that go with it. You know, we want those jobs to be our Georgians who know how to do it, but are currently leaving to take those jobs in other locations, right? We've also heard, you know, obviously from the Macon city leaders and the state and their stakeholders, how they're all coming together to work. I think it would benefit us greatly to have that music office so that we can connect these cities. We see what Macon's doing. As part of my consulting firm, we've done some economic impact and strategic planning for other cities around the state. We're working with DeKalb County, we're working with Stonecrest, we're working with Columbus on theirs. So there is an investment at the city levels already. As Josh said, you know, the Performing Arts Center in Columbia County was funded by tax dollars, the same with Savannah's brand new arena that would benefit from something like this. And we heard about Athens Classic Center as well. And they've just invested in, you know, expanding that facility, as well as Macon's Amphitheater and the Otis Redding Foundation's venue that they're expanding as well. So we kind of think that there, you know, there's a lot happening and there's a lot of potential. I think Brian said it best in Athens when he said we could be the model. What we're missing is that glue, and we're missing a strategic plan to really coalesce all these strengths that we have in music. But without someone heading that up, without someone really that is a part of the industry, that has the relationships needed, whose job it is to pull together all the parts that intersect with music. You know, music, we've heard the comparisons to the film industry. It does touch on film and video games, because without film and video games, and without music in film and video games, I mean, you know, they're nothing. They're images, right? Silent images. But it also touches on theater, which we heard from Norm today. Music education is a big factor. We have 48 post-secondary programs in the state of Georgia, educating our, you know, our future talent. And just last week, Kennesaw KSU received a recognition from Billboard magazine as one of the top music business programs in the world. And that's the KSU Joel Katz School of Music and Entertainment. You know, I think that Andrew Ratcliffe had mentioned in Athens, perhaps, you know, developing, we may be late on, but we should, you know, put together a Georgia Music Academy, similar to the Film Academy. We've got the talent. It could be something that's developed through a CTAE program. Georgia Music Partners is working on one right now with, and if you guys have not been down to Coweta County, they've got the Career Academy there, and they've got a fantastic music program. Those students in grades 8 through 12 are ready at graduation to start working. They're ready for these jobs in music, whether they're in studios or running live sound. However, those jobs are few and far between here right now. So we're looking for a way to, you know, to help these students. So, but going back, so music also obviously intersects education and tourism. As we mentioned, we do have the support and have of, as Norm said, I believe, the Georgia Tourism and Convention Bureaus and the Georgia Restaurant Association. They, through COVID, you know, there became more of an awareness of the impact of these small theaters on the economy of smaller communities. When a concert, when a theater show is happening, that contributes. Every dollar spent for a live event is $12 back to the community. And so we think that there's a real opportunity here. And music is just, it's good business sense for the state, right? And we're at a point now where we need to retain what we have and build on it. It's, you know, for all of you business leaders, you know that retention makes much more business sense than trying to acquire new business. And so we're at a point where let's retain what we have and let's bet on the home team. We've kind of, you know, I think we all support music, but we really need to bet on it now. And I will take any questions you have. You know, we can dig in a little bit more, but I thank you all for your time.
Thank you so much. And I think it brightened my eyes up even more when you mentioned, you know, like the career academies, because as a musician, my family, most of the people in my family started music like 7, 8 years old, just naturally playing and, you know, started making money. I mean, don't report that to the IRS or anything. We were 8 and 9 years old, you know. So yeah, child labor acts. But, you know, we were ready, and we, you know, was, you know, doing a lot of things like you're saying, that retention of, or even combing that talent that we have in all these local communities. So if they get to where they're talented and learn things, we're tired of them going out of the state with that talent that we've invested in. So I think what you're saying is, if we could just connect all these dots together, that's why I was asking the question, which state agencies are everybody, who's the common denominators in this? So once we know the common players and what we need to do to see the big picture, tie it all together, then we can really compete against others, especially the tax incentives. And another thing we have to do is watch our politics in Georgia, even though we may have everything in place, but we've seen in the past, because of politics, was a reason why some people not come to Georgia. So I just think that we just need to be on one page and everybody understand that we have to have a great structure, but also have an even better infrastructure on what we're doing in Georgia in the music industry. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Representative Sharper. I appreciate the work that you do with, you know, with young children and educating them on music, and you know, that's just something that we've done all along here in the state. It's just you know, we're missing that final piece where we're attracting the opportunities, the big business, and other folks are doing it, frankly, better, and they are taking our, you know, our folks. And going back to what you said, you know, most musical talent out of Georgia is being developed in churches and faith-based music, and whether they remain in that or not, you know, that's different, but most of them begin, and that is happening not just in the major metro areas, that is happening all over. And so I appreciate that you brought that up. I do want to just kind of talk about the main takeaways. And I think we've heard time and time again, as we've, you know, listened to all these great speakers that we've had, you know, that the main takeaways that I've seen out of this is, you know, that really finding, you know, a dedicated music office that can focus on all these things. And, you know, that making some sort of tax incentive fix for this incentive that expires in January. And I think the one thing that I didn't touch back on, that if, you know, if you don't mind, I do. I think we heard from Montu in Athens, and it comes to your point about, you know, what agencies are involved. You know, the Georgia Council for the Arts does a lot of great work, and music is also a part of the arts. And again, it's, you know, it touches on film and theater and the arts, but it's also its own thing. So, you know, maybe if the arts grants typically end up getting awarded to more of the performing arts or visual artists, but maybe setting aside a separate bucket or tranche for music, you know, for the smaller independent artists, for the artists, like Senator Goodman had mentioned, in some of these rural communities who are doing great work to develop programs locally, and maybe can't access the big dollars, but what they do has a big impact on their small communities.
All right. Yes.
I would say, just for the record, Representative Tyler Paul Smith walked in, so we now are 3 House members to 3 Senate members. So I call this a tie. And what does it go? Tie goes to the House. I think that's how that normally works. At least it does in the casinos I've been to. All right. Anybody else have any further questions or thoughts as we wipe this thing down? I will say a lot of what Representative Sharper just spoke about. I think we heard with our first speaker as well, that connectivity, that connective tissue that he's talking about, I think is what's happening out in Texas. And I think also the politics part of putting it under the governor's office would keep it out of the every 2-year cycle fray of changing politics and changing people in positions. So that's right. So I think those are I think that the success story that we're hearing out of Austin is definitely pointing me my thoughts in that direction anyway, that we look at housing that in the governor's office. So I appreciate you very much, guys. And at this time, with no further questions, we're going to break, and hopefully we'll round this thing up here in a couple of weeks and get some suggestions out of this committee. Thank you very much. Oh, yes, sir. Sorry, one more.
Have the incentive. When you talk about a building and a facility, a promoter looks at what his expenses is going to be. For instance, say that the fee at the Coliseum is 5,000 versus 12%, whichever is greater. When they bring those shows in with their expenses, when they go into a public building, they don't get any concession, none of the concessions. You can't sell if you don't have any folks there. They don't get into the parking. Well, you can't take up parking money if you don't have any folks coming to the event. So when we look at it, we need to find out what they're doing, because most of these facilities are owned by the county or the city. So when you talk about doing the incentives, where do we give the incentive to? And need to understand that if we do it, they need to have an obligation of being able to bring those shows there to do some things. But it's all about contracts and money. And what I've experienced in Macon, Georgia, we used to have some of the top shows coming. And because the promoter did not do enough ticket sales just to pay for the deposit that he had on the acts, they canceled the show, which meant we had nobody coming there. You had a date, but now the date is gone because nobody is coming because they canceled the show. And so if we're going to do it, we also need to look at how we're going to deal with these public entities who have these buildings.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with you that there definitely needs to be a conversation of, they need to, if they want more shows, they need to play ball, for lack of a better term, and negotiate some of that stuff out, right? And say, look, all right, if you bring this show, I'll give you a kickback on the parking. I'll give you a kickback, a percentage of the concessions. All those pieces obviously need to be addressed. And it can't just be, hey, state, you give us a tax incentive so we can get acts here. It needs to be, hey, you need to open your eyes, and you got to play ball at the end of the day.
How do you give the incentive? You're not talking about like the film industry,
right?
That comes out of somewhere else, most of them. But you're talking about governmental entities, which were funded by taxpayers.
Right.
So how do you give the tax incentive to that governmental entity? And if you're going to give it, what are they gonna do as far as the promotions and bringing events to the community?
Sure.
I'm gonna touch on that for a second. I mean, because it sounds like you're talking about some of the like concerts, like the shows used to come in, like it's just a tour, individual tour. Now, if we had something similar to the music-friendly community programs, and everybody's, tied together and understanding that is a local and county, like if it's, let's say the Mathis City Auditorium about Osta, want to have a concert, but that means the local people, local policymakers, or just, the manager, the city manager, whatever they can do as far as their pricing and say, okay, if we want concerts to come here, let's work with these promoters. And through the family friendly community crew, they'll know that, hey, I'm in this city, who wants to come? This is what we can do. What we'll do is we'll do the Coliseum or auditorium half off, because we're not really losing, but we're gonna gain because we're giving you half off, but the food, the hotels, all the things, we're gonna make up for that. Or we're gonna get in some other promoter's mind to say, hey, look, I see what they're doing in Valdosta versus Macon or what have you, and we want to go there. So I think that's gonna be, I don't know if you were here earlier when they was talking about the Texas one, but they talked about a music-friendly community, kind of like a coalition of people working together and knowing what's out there, so that the local officials and local leaders can say we can give some type of incentive, and it's not a tax incentive on the statewide, but it's something that we can do.
Government don't pay no tax.
Right.
And so what I'm saying is when you do it, we need to have, do we have somebody here from Legislative Council? I think we need to get a critique of these state laws and how they did it, because we're dealing with governmental entities. So how do you give a tax incentive to a governmental entity?
Can I jump in?
Yeah, one second.
You give it to you give it to the production company. The tax incentives to the production company to help them offset some of their costs to come to Georgia to set up that production. So then they pay the various facilities. They rent the various facilities, rent the hotel rooms, eat the food, all those other pieces. But the incentive itself is staged at the production level.
Well, what I'm saying is this: where do you get the money to give the tax incentive? Where does the money come from? Are we gonna put some money in a bucket and say, now this is how we gonna distribute it? Or are we gonna find out what the other states did? Because just about all of your big facilities are owned by your county or city government, period.
That's right. Usually funded through CVB, hotel motel tax money.
That
and then some
and then they
kick in.
sell bonds and
Mhm.
stuff to build the facilities and those kind of things. So I think we need to know what the Texas law do, or what does the Tennessee law do? How did they get started? Because when you talk about movies, you talk about a whole different thing. They got an entire production thing, and they come when they get ready to do the movie, or whatever it is, Fox Films or whatever it is. Those are the folks who get the advantage of it. If we're talking about doing concerts and shows and stuff, these buildings are owned by the public. And so how do you deal with the incentive to the public entity? And if we get that worked out, then we also have to have a conversation with these public entities about what we're doing and trying to make sure that you can keep your doors open and it's not a liability, because the taxpayer picks up the liability when there's a show.
Yeah, sure. I apologize, Mala.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes, sir. Thank you, Chairman. Senator Lucas, I'm going to add just two things to maybe help you clarify a little bit. So the other states that currently are doing this and are successful, I want to clarify that the tax incentive proposal for music tour originations is not for one-off concerts. It is for the tour rehearsal ahead of the concerts. So what happens is, typically those tours the rehearsals can be a week up to, for Beyonce, sometimes a couple of months. And the money for those tour rehearsals comes from the artist or the tour production. They are renting the facilities. They are renting the Macon Coliseum, for example. And then that tax credit goes to that production. However, in Macon, we are working currently with the consolidated Macon-Bibb County government, with Visit Macon and Macon Arts on a a joint entertainment commission that would deal specifically similar to what Brendan from the Texas Music Office had suggested, is having these, these commissions at the city levels, county levels, having more of a voice in how local entertainment and music is handled. So in Macon, that work has already begun. And so I would recommend that if you've got some time, I'm happy to connect you with the people that are already having those conversations to make sure local policy helps support the local music industry. I hope that's helpful.
It is, but listen, even on tours, usually it's whoever the headliner is. That's where they normally do the rehearsing and everything, because when they go on tour, the dates are already set. They are already set. So whoever the headliner is, like you do a Keith Sweat, he's in Atlanta, Georgia. He goes on tour and got several acts with him. They rehearsing where he is. So that means a facility in Atlanta would be able to be the rehearsal studio. The dynamics of public money funds these facilities, taxpayers. The question is, and what I want to know, how do we do the incentive so that they are able to do those kind of things and be able to say, hey, if y'all need a place to rehearse, we got the ideal place. And these are the things that we can do. But what I'm saying is, how do we, by law, do it? Because majority of these places are owned by public taxpayers. And so how do you get the incentive to the government in order to do those kind of things and bring those acts in? Because it takes money when you talk about a production, it takes money to do it, because you got to set it up, you got to do the rehearsal time, all of that, and you got to have all the parties who are going to be involved. They part of the rehearsal. And then they go out on tour.
I think the best way I can describe it is what the incentive we're talking about is suggesting is we're giving production companies a coupon to spend at any of our, if we call venues restaurants, Macon, Columbus, we're giving a customer of those facilities a coupon to go, so that they'll be incentivized to go to those facilities and rent those facilities. So the facilities are getting the full rental price that they would get. We're just incentivizing it on the front side to the customer. So the customer is going to pay the ticket, the 10 grand to Macon. And then on the backside, the customer gets a rebate, if you will. And so that's where the incentive piece comes. So we're not actually giving Macon the incentive. We're incentivizing their customer to use the Macon facility. Does that make sense? Oh yeah. Yeah. Always. And I think we have a gentleman in the auditorium here that would like to step up to the mic. If you'll introduce yourself. We appreciate you very much being here. One, let's try that. All right, go ahead, sir. Introduce yourself.
Andre White. I'm with the Georgia Sentinel newspaper. Also work as a lobbyist with Wayfield Foods. I have a lot of experience in the promotion business, everything from concert promotions to HBCU football games. And I very specifically wanted to address the representative's comments about how and why shows leave a venue after it's already been booked. The number one culprit of the last 20 years is Ticketmaster. If I book a ticket for $20, Ticketmaster gets involved, there's another $25 added onto that ticket. Given the household income and population of relevant demographics for that show in Macon versus Atlanta, that $20 is going to be a determining factor. And if I can't pre-sell and or have sponsor dollars in a market that can help mitigate some of those costs, then that concert never happens. So whether it's the incentives that we're talking about is two different things. A production of a theater show has nothing to do with Keith Sweat coming to Macon. It's what the promoter can charge and what's being added on for charges that will bring that ticket too high for that market. I just simply wanted to address that because as a promotion consultant with a game in Macon this weekend, HBCU football game in Macon this weekend. All right. One of the biggest problems that we have, just having left St. Louis with a similar issue, is Ticketmaster and those departments within the municipality that can add on service charges here and there. This is what I'm saying. So so that's what I'm.
Unless it's the Macon Coliseum, then you don't have to do it.
You have a direct sale opportunity.
But the problem I have is when you look at a particular show and say you get ready to do it, you got a rider that's presented to you by all the group. Then you got to see by hotel. You got to see by meal. You go to the public venue. You get no concession. You get no park. And if you weren't doing it, the venue would not be open for the show.
And once upon a time, all of that would have been fine.
Yeah.
The new character in the mix.
Ticketmaster.
Ticketmaster.
They don't worry about it 'cause they sell tickets. I do all mine, but with Mercy University, pay very little service charge. But I'm just talking about when you talk about the incentive, we got to deal with how you do it. If you got public facilities that are involved, how you gonna negotiate with them on doing the incentive, and then the difference is, do we appropriate the money to start the incentive program? And if we do, how do we look at what it's doing? You know, that was the biggest thing with the film industry and all the flack we caught in the news media everywhere else, and they would reaping out all the benefits, and then some of them were selling the tax incentives to other groups. All right. So one last thing here.
So I just want to say that what has struck me in today's committee hearings and the last two is that if we think about the film tax credits and what we've been able to accomplish with film over the last 10 years, it's a template minus the sitting in the office of the governor. That's actually a different best practice that we got to consider. But it is, you've got the tax credit. It therefore attracts the new business. That's an economic development vehicle. You then build up the infrastructure so that we've got the talent. We've already got talent, but you further build out that talent. That's a workforce development issue for the state. You create the career academies, a la the Georgia Film Academy, replicate that in music. Now you're doing more training, and it all feeds back into the infrastructure that you end up creating first by attracting the business here to begin with.
That's right. And I think what we toured down in Athens shows that there is infrastructure in place to produce the talent that's needed to help the industry thrive. So yeah, I agree with you. That's a good recap of what we're doing. And
One quick thing.
All right, I knew we weren't gonna get out of here clean today. I knew we get, but once it gets going, baby, everybody got it. Let's go.
Well, in order to know what made us lose with Mr. Easterbrook and Mr. Smalls, we need to find out what tax incentives beat us out in New York and Louisiana, wherever it was. So I think that's one we need to, that's a deliverable for today, to find out what beat us.
And I'm a big fan of not always being the cheapest guy in the room, right? Is like the guy in Columbia County said, he said, people would love to come here because we've got dock high and load in. It's a lot easier to load in. Well, then if that's the case, we don't have to be the cheapest guy on the street, right? We can, there should be some value there. So anyway, I think, as we move through this thing, we should have some stuff to look at when we catch back up. Mhm. All right, folks, thank you so much for being here. If you watched online, I'm sure you learned all you needed to know today. Y'all have a great day, and we are adjourned.